Thank you for tuning in 5 Minutes with KeRusso. We are looking at this last block of teaching in Matthew chapter 24 and 25, where Jesus tells his disciples how to be disciples. Now we're going to focus on 25, but how does Jesus get into his teachings in chapter 25? You start off with the disciples wanting Jesus to admire the Temple Mount. And Jesus doesn't fall into that. And he says, it's not really what gets my attention. And he tells them this is not going to last. This building is going to fall. It's going to be thrown down. So the disciples ask a question, when is it going to happen? That leads Jesus into talking about some very terrible days they're going to have to go through. And eventually where he's talking about his return and how he's going to bless all those disciples who are faithful to him, even in terrible times. But nobody knows when Jesus is going to return. He says that several times. Well, that leads him to 25, where he tells 3 stories to just kind of drive this point home and get his disciples to focus on what's important. The first story, well, first of all, these 3 stories, you need to see them as being connected. They're not independent. They're sequential. One leads into the other, and each gets more specific than the one before. And here's how it breaks down. The first story is a parable about a wedding and some virgins who were assigned to take care of the bridegroom. And some prepared for a delay, some didn't. And there was a delay, a longer delay than anybody expected, any of the 10 expected. And the result is 5 of the virgins don't get a chance to celebrate the wedding because they weren't prepared for the delay. They weren't really ready for the return of Jesus, the bridegroom. And that's the point of the parable. Be prepared, because you don't know when it's going to happen. But Jesus is going to come sooner or later, so always be prepared. That leads you to the second parable, because you might be asking the question, well, how do you prepare? Well, the second parable is a little bit more specific. A master's going on a journey, and so he gives his servants his possessions, his money to put to use, so that when he returns, his business is prospered and his kingdom has grown, and he expects them to be responsible for what he's given them. One he gives a lot of money to, one he gives a middle amount of money to, and one he gives a little bit of money to. But the amount is not important. It's what they do with it. Are they responsible with what he's given them to do? 2 are, 1 isn't. The 2 that are welcomed into the master's joy and happiness, and they're rewarded with even more. And the one who didn't, the guy who was given a little bit amount of money, is thrown into eternal darkness where there's weeping and gnashing teeth, because he didn't put to work. He wasn't responsible with what he was given to do. And that's the message. If you and I want to prepare for the return of Jesus, we need to do whatever God has given us to do. Big or small, doesn't matter. But whatever he's given us to do, we need to be responsible and do it. That takes us to the third story, the story of a judgment scene with Jesus and all people in the world. They're viewed as sheep and goats, and the sheep are brought into the kingdom, prepared for them since the creation of the world, and they get to live forever, and they're blessed. And the goats are thrown into eternal fire with the devil and his angels in eternal punishment, because they did not do what they were given to do. Well, what were they given to do that they didn't do? And what did the sheep do that they were given to do? They took care of the people that were forgotten, overlooked, neglected. The people who were hungry needed something to eat, thirsty needed something to drink, needed a place to stay, needed some clothes, needed visitation and caring, and the least, the people that were forgotten by everybody else, people overlooked, people oppressed, people invisible. Disciples of Jesus see those folks, and when they cross paths with them, they take care of them. And that's what Jesus is telling his disciples. The kingdom is not about buildings, it's about people. And what Jesus is focused on is not the grand things like church buildings and temples and cathedrals, but how his disciples treat the little folks. There are a lot of them around. How do you treat them? Maybe you don't give them a second thought. Maybe you're too busy. Well, that's not going to be a good thing when Jesus returns, because that's your responsibility as a disciple of Jesus, to see those folks. Now, you might be part of some big, grand church that does great things and grand things to help those folks. That's great. Roll up your sleeves and join in with them. Or you might just be an individual disciple going to the grocery store or going to work, and one of those folks crossed your paths. You don't have a lot, but whatever you have, you give them, or you use to help them. That's great too. It matters. That's where Jesus wants the focus of his disciples. That's what he's been teaching. That's what you and I need to hear. Now, the next two videos, there'll be some other guys who'll come along and they're going to talk more about that. So I hope you'll tune in. Thank you for listening to me today. And leave any comments that you want to, or send an email to me at booksbyKeRusso@gmail.com. Not only can you be blessed, but pass those blessings on, especially those forgotten people, overlooked people. Thank you.